Okay. All right. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So today we will be joined by our guest, Ryan Paulson, who is the director of the Food and Agriculture Organization Office of Emergencies and Resilience, and he will brief on the food insecurity situation in Sudan. And a programming note that tomorrow, Thursday, we will be joined virtually by our guest, Ulrika Richardson, the resident and humanitarian coordinator in Haiti. And she'll brief you on the situation there. Okay. So today in Brussels, the Secretary General attended a working lunch organized by Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission. And after, they had a joint press encounter that took place before the lunch, they had a joint press encounter in which the Secretary General said they are meeting at a particularly dark moment when Europe's role on the global stage is more important than ever. Turning to the situation in Ukraine, the Secretary General reiterated his call for a just peace, respecting the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. And turning to Gaza, he said that as more than half of the population, over 1 million people, are facing catastrophic hunger, he called on the Israeli authorities to ensure complete and unfettered access for humanitarian goods throughout Gaza and for the international community to fully support our humanitarian efforts. We must keep doing everything to stop the killing, reach an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, and secure the unconditional release of the hostages, he added. Beyond these wars, mistrust and division rule the day, Mr. Guterres said. Multilateralism and solidarity are in the DNA of the European Union, and as we prepare for the UN Summit of the Future in September, he urged the European Union and its member states to keep pushing for a more inclusive, effective, and resilient international system. And also today, the Secretary General had meetings with Hajjal Abib and Caroline Jenis, respectively, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Development Cooperation of Belgium, as well as with Jutta Urpilainen, the EU Commissioner for International Partnership. And tomorrow, at the opening of the European Council, the Secretary General will attend a working lunch with the heads of state and government of the European Union. And he's also scheduled to meet the President of the European Parliament, Robert Metsola, and others. And back here this morning, the Security Council held a briefing in which it heard from Edem Osornu, the Director of Operations and Advocacy at the Office for Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs, who warned Council members of a far-reaching and fast-deteriorating situation of food insecurity in Sudan, a situation driven by 11 months of brutal and unremitting conflict. She said that in Khartoum, Darfur, and Kordofan, which are home to 90% of people facing emergency levels of acute insecurity, there has been no respite from the fierce fighting for 340 days. Ms. Wosornu also noted that our humanitarian partners estimate in the coming weeks and months, somewhere in the region of around 222,000 children could die from malnutrition. And also briefing council members was Karl Skau, the World Food Programme Deputy Executive Director, and he said that across the region, nearly 28 million people face acute insecurity, food insecurity, with 18 million in Sudan, 7 million in South Sudan, and nearly 3 million in Chad. Despite the World Food Programme's efforts, he said that the emergency relief operation is being severely hampered by a lack of access and a lack of resources. For his part, the Deputy Director General of the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, Maurizio Martina, warned that the spread of conflict to Al Jazeera poses a significant threat to national food production, given the state accounts for about 50% of wheat and 10% of sorghum, essential crops for the country. All these remarks were shared with you, and of course, our guests will be able to elaborate more on that. And turning to Gaza, on the UNRWA review, the independent review group that is assessing whether the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, which you know as UNRWA, is doing everything within its power to ensure neutrality and to respond to allegations of serious breaches when they are made. And this interim report will be officially presented to the Secretary General later today by Catherine Colonna, as you know. You will recall that the review is led by Ms. Colonna, who is working with 3 research organizations, the Raoul Wallenberg Institute in Sweden, the Mikkelsen Institute in Norway, and the Danish Institute for Human Rights. And yesterday, the group presented the interim report findings and recommendations to the Secretary General in person. As you know, it will be done so officially later today. And the interim report found that UNRWA has in place a significant number of mechanisms and procedures to ensure compliance with the humanitarian principle of neutrality. And the group has also identified critical areas that still need to be addressed. The review group will now develop concrete and realistic recommendations on how to address these critical areas to strengthen and improve UNRWA. And the group, as you know, will present the final report on the 20th of April, and this report will be made public. So now we turn to the situation in Gaza. The humanitarian situation, our colleagues tell us that the Israeli military operation in and around Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City continued for a 3rd straight day. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs continues to call for civilians, including sick and wounded patients and medical staff, to be protected. Hospitals and healthcare facilities should not be targeted. The World Health Organization has documented 410 attacks on healthcare in Gaza since the 7th of October. That's as of a week ago. These attacks reportedly caused hundreds of casualties, damaged nearly 100 facilities, and affected more than 100 ambulances. And in the West Bank, the World Health Organization has documented 403 attacks on healthcare since 7th of October during the same period. These attacks reportedly killed nearly a dozen people, injured almost 70 others, and affected nearly 50 health facilities and 275 ambulances. WHO is calling for civilians and healthcare to be protected and international law to be respected. Meanwhile, the senior humanitarian and reconstruction coordinator for Gaza, Sigrid Kaag, is in Cyprus today and tomorrow for talks on maritime shipments of aid to Gaza. And now turning to Haiti, where our humanitarian colleagues tell us that they were able to bring in by air more than 800 kilos of medicine, including blood bags and other medical supplies, in addition to humanitarian staff. These supplies have been critical for the health response by UN agencies and NGOs, with health facilities being severely affected by the violence. This has also allowed humanitarian organizations to have sufficient staff in the country to continue to deliver aid. And also the World Food Programme distributed more than 8,400 hot meals yesterday to people forced to flee their homes in Port-au-Prince. And also you will have seen that the UN Refugee Agency today issued new legal guidance to ensure that international refugee protection is provided for Haitians who need it. UNHCR's new guidance aims to assist states with their assessment of asylum claims, considering the stark realities that Haitians are facing today. In the new guidance, the agency considers that, in line with the 1951 Refugee Convention, Haitians who should be deemed eligible for refugee protection may include political activists, journalists, judges, lawyers, and others fighting corruption and crime, among other risk profiles. Furthermore, Haitians may also be eligible for refugee protection or under the 1984 Cartagena Declaration's regional refugee definition. Under this definition, this is applied by many countries in the region, refugee protection should be extended to individuals affected by circumstances that seriously disturb public order in the country and by generalized violence in areas impacted by gang activities. And I would refer you to UNHCR if you want more information on that. And now we turn to Ukraine, where our humanitarian colleagues report that ongoing hostilities continued to severely impede the delivery of humanitarian aid and services in January and February, particularly in frontline communities. And that's according to OCHA's latest assessment of humanitarian access. The delivery of aid to people in territories occupied by the Russian Federation remains especially challenging. For example, getting aid to civilians in Avdiivka in the eastern region of Donetsk has been impossible since the occupation of the city in February. Our colleagues note that most residents there are heavily reliant on humanitarian assistance, and the security situation has also made it more difficult to reach neighboring communities hosting people displaced by the hostilities. Humanitarian workers in Ukraine also continue to face threats to their security. In January and February alone, 8 organizations in the country reported at least 24 incidents impacting humanitarian access, with 2 aid workers killed and 10 others injured. There were also more than a dozen incidents in which humanitarian assets and facilities were damaged. And in Myanmar, where the conflict continues to drive humanitarian needs and pose grave protection threats, we can tell you in Rakhine, the civilian population bears the brunt of the continued fighting between the Arakan army and the Myanmar armed forces, with deadly aerial bombardment and heavy shelling in residential areas. Forced recruitment is also a growing concern. Humanitarian organizations are sounding the alarm over water scarcity in sites housing displaced people, as the area soon faces the driest weeks of the year. Some aid is reaching affected communities through local efforts, but it is not enough. Stockpiles of life-saving supplies are dwindling with the cyclone season just around the corner. And in the southeast of the country, airstrikes and shelling have also been reported over recent days in Hopong and Sisang, pardon my pronunciation, townships in southern Shan, reportedly injuring several civilians and damaging homes. In the northwest, clashes are severely affecting civilians in the township of Kale in Sagaing. Some 28,000 people have been displaced since the escalation of fighting between the Myanmar Armed Forces and People's Defense Forces in this area in late February. This includes some 7,000 people who were newly reported as displaced in the last week alone. And also in the northeast, more than 20,000 people have been forced to flee their homes in 10 townships in Kachin since the Kachin Independence Army launched a new wave of offensive attacks on 7th of March. And this has worsened humanitarian needs among an already vulnerable population. And as you know, funding continues to remain a major challenge to response efforts. Our humanitarian needs and response plan for this year seeks $994 million, and it is just 7% funded at $74 million. So additional resources are urgently needed. And an update on the Secretary General's report on the Peacebuilding Fund for 2023 was released today. Responding to national demand for peacebuilding support, the fund approved $202 million last year to support communities and institution building in 36 countries and territories. Across the 3 priority windows of the fund's 2020 to 2024 strategy, it approved more than $24 million for supporting cross-border and regional approaches, $38 million for facilitating UN transitions, and $57 million for women's and youth empowerment. Overall, support fell significantly short of demand and below the targeted level due to reduced financing. With increased demand from member states despite a decline in contributions, the fund has reached its lowest liquidity levels since its inception. And we need to invest now in sustainable peace for tomorrow. I guess it goes without saying. Finally, today, a few more notes, I'm almost done. Today is the International Day of Happiness. Oh, at least I got a few smiles out of you, which recognizes the relevance of happiness and well-being as universal goals and aspirations in the lives of human beings around the world, and the importance of their recognition in public policy objectives. And today, I'm sad that Steph is not here for this. He would have enjoyed it. Today is also French Language Day. Désolé, Stéphane. And 2 more things. This is more of a housekeeping note. You will have seen that we emailed all of you details earlier of a new platform that we just launched, which is our WhatsApp channel. You can now follow us there to get notifications about the new briefing, including the highlights, the transcript. We'll also we'll ping you about what's happening with stakeouts, press encounters, and more. If you go there, you'll see that there's already some updates about the Secretary General's travels. So this is just another way to make sure that you're getting information from us as easy and as fast as possible. Make sure you turn on your notifications, because otherwise you won't know that we've posted new things. And finally, I have a quiz for you today. Since 2 more member states paid up their dues for the regular budget, these are 2 island nations. Ironically, both countries, one in the Caribbean and one in Melanesia, are parliamentary republics, and both have capital cities whose names begin with port. Any guesses? And the Secretary General, by the way, has been to both, one last year and one in his first term. Port, well, okay, so Port of Spain. There we go. And Port Vila, which is Vanuatu. All right, okay. So I guess with that, I'll give it to Edie since she got one right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We were told yesterday that Madame Colonna was going to come to speak to us. Is that still the case? And you said that her interim report talked about areas to be addressed. Can we get some details on those areas?
So what I can tell you is, yes, we wanted to have her speak. Unfortunately, that won't be possible. I will try to get you more details on those areas, but I also want to remind you that this is an interim report, and you will be able to have full access to the whole thing in a month.
And a question on Haiti. Has the UN received any update on efforts to put together this transitional presidency?
No, I mean, I know that there have been, we're in the loop in discussions, and we are following progress on the process. But that's it for now. We have nothing major to say on that front. Yes.
Thank you. Just to follow up on
There we go.
Here we go. The U.S. lawmakers and the White House have reached some sort of agreement on a funding bill that would ban or continue the freeze on funding UNRWA until at least next spring. Do you have a comment on that? What does this mean, especially now that we're in an election year and we don't know how things will materialize later?
I mean, our only comment is that obviously we have been emphasizing that UNRWA plays an essential part in delivering aid to most Palestinians in the areas that are being heavily impacted, right? And being able to fund UNRWA appropriately is really crucial to get this aid to these people and for them to do the work that they're meant to do. Well, And we also know that the Secretary General has been working hard, talking to member states that are donors to get them to resume the funding. So we will continue to do our work, but we don't have any specific comment on that.
But I mean, are there any alternative plans to get different sources of funding, kind of to cover what we now sort of know that for the next few months, the U.S. won't be contributing if this bill actually
I can
passed.
assure you that the Secretary General is working very hard behind the scenes to ensure that the agency continues to be able to do its work. Deji.
Yes, first a follow-up on the midterm report.
Yeah.
It says it found the UNRWA has placed significant numbers of mechanisms and procedures to ensure compliance with the humanitarian principle of neutrality, and also some places needs to be addressed. I know you are working very hard to give us as information as you can, but let me try the other way. Can you tell us the portionality of these two, like how many areas they have these mechanisms of neutrality, and what percentage of the areas that needs to be addressed, like 50-50, 60-40?
At this point, I'm not able to give you the percentages, but as I told Edie, we will work on sharing which areas those are with you as soon as we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
We know this week the IPCC report came out, and the UN said that the Gazan people, they are facing famine, threat of
Yes.
famine, and the human rights commissioner Turk even said that Israel restriction on the entry of aid may amount to, quote, starvation as a method of war. Yesterday, U.S. Department of State spokesperson told reporters that the U.S. said not yet seeing conclusive evidence indicating that Israel is using starvation as a weapon in the Gaza war. What do you see of this contradiction of the UN and the U.S. Department of State?
I mean, obviously, we stand by what our High Commissioner said, and we stand by what the report presented on Monday said. So we wouldn't comment on.
Okay, so basically, the SG himself said it's a man-made disaster.
Yes, correct.
What's the role of Hamas in this man-made disaster? Has they holding up aid deliveries or
I mean, I think when we say man-made disaster, the thing to bear in mind is that while there are many people who are facing food insecurity in the world, a lot of it has to do with climate change, natural disasters, things like this. And this could have been entirely preventable, right? We are just saying that the situation, the conflict, all the warring parties can still avoid this. Yes.
Thank you, Florencia. Just following up on Edie's question about the interim report, you said that Ms. Colonna was not going to be available to speak to the press today, correct?
Correct.
Are you leaving the door open that she might later in the week, or should we insinuate by this that we won't hear from her until the final report is issued?
Yes, the second part.
On that note of Day of Happiness, or not Day of Happiness. Sorry, that was a bad joke. Moving to Sudan.
Okay.
There's a humanitarian conference in Paris next month. Would the Secretary General support the RSF and SAF sending representatives to that to perhaps kickstart a discussion there on a peace plan?
I think we support any initiative that brings the parties together to move forward on their transitional arrangements.
And one follow-up on Sudan. One of the border crossings with Chad has apparently been opened. It was discussed in the council as well as by the resident humanitarian coordinator, mentioned it as well on social media recently. There seems to be some debate, perhaps, if that is enough, that one crossing. What is the Secretary General's view on that border crossing opening?
I mean, I think we
Chad.
had spoken on this already, in that we continue to engage with the Sudanese authorities and all the relevant parties to expand humanitarian access. I think what we want to have is free access for all humanitarian aid, not just one crossing, right? Deji again.
Sorry, I just saw this. Just now, the community of Latin American and Caribbean states sent a letter to Secretary General urging the United Nations to cast a vote to officially recognize Palestine as a official member state. Has the SG received that letter?
I will check, because I hadn't seen that myself, but I will check on that for you. Okay, yes, Linda.
Thank you. I'm following up on Deji's question about, he was talking about how the tragedy in Gaza is a man-made disaster.
Yes.
And the question I believe he asked is, what role is Hamas playing in that? And I was just wondering if you have any further information in terms of their role in impacting the situation, food crisis and all
I
that.
mean, I think I've been clear in the sense that saying that this could have been preventable and that all parties can still, what we're hoping is that both the Israeli authorities and Hamas come to some sort of arrangement which is a man-made arrangement, which can put a stop to this. So,
But just to follow up on that, does the UN have a sense of, I can't say exactly what portion we know that Israel is playing a tremendous role in limiting food aid and that kind of thing. But I was wondering if there's a sense of what the UN feels the other side is doing. Is it maybe 10%, 20% is due to the other side? And
I mean,
80
I don't-
just in a mathematical sense.
Yeah, I think we're not in the position of mathematics. I would say, Stefan would say, math is not really our strong point, but at the same time, we're not here to apportion blame mathematically on any party. We're just saying this is a situation that can still find a solution, and this solution requires both parties to work together, right? Alan, yes.
Thanks so much, Florencia. Today, Chancellor Scholz made a statement regarding the future of the Palestine. He said that the way towards the peace between Israelis and Palestinians lays through the establishment of the Palestinian State. But he also said that it's clear that this state should be without its own defense forces. What's the stance of the UN regarding this statement?
I mean, we don't really have a particular comment on that other than to reiterate our position, right? Which is that we want parties to come to a solution, and the only solution is a two-state solution at this point. Any further specifics on that would have to come day by day, but right now we're just dealing with the current situation, which is a humanitarian catastrophe.
Just to follow up, I mean, if we're talking about the state as it is, the Palestinian state, all the states have their own defense forces. I mean, doesn't it look like strange if there is a state without defense forces?
Well, as I said, this is still a hypothetical. We would still need to have some arrangement and agreement from both parties to have a two-state solution, which at this point, sadly, we do not. I think I have Abdelhamid online.
Thank you so much. I have a few questions. First, have you heard the statement of Jared Kushner, the former advisor, former President Trump, saying that Palestinians should be ethnically cleansed to the Negev desert, and because the real estate in Gaza would be extremely lucrative? Did you hear that statement?
I
If you
did.
have any
I did
comment.
see the statement. I don't particularly wish to comment other than to say no one should be ethnically cleansed.
Okay, the second question, the Shifa hospital was stormed again, starting Monday morning. I
Yes.
haven't seen any comment by any UN official on this third or fourth or fifth storming of the hospital, where many innocent people were killed. Do you have any statement on that?
I mean, I think we continue, and I know that we said this before, that the Secretary General is deeply alarmed by this operation inside Al-Shifa Hospital, where thousands have been displaced and sheltering. I think we reiterate that all parties must comply with international humanitarian law, and hospitals can only lose their protected status if they are used outside of their humanitarian function. And I think there have been others who have been vocal about this, including Dr. Tedros, very forcefully on this. And if there's nothing else, I will go get our guest who will brief you on Sudan. Thank you.